Hi, and welcome to Next Generation Finance, an SEB podcast about sustainable finance and the sustainable finance market, where we discuss its history, recent developments, and forecasts for the future. My name is Lina Apsheva. I'm an analyst within sustainable finance here at SEB, and today I'm joined by two of my colleagues, Isabelle Tibbelin, who's an advisor within climate and sustainable finance. Hi, Isabelle.
Hi, Lina.
And Georgzén, who's the Deputy Head of Sustainability at Life and the Corporate and Private Customer Division here at SEB. Hi, Per.
Hello, nice to be here.
So today we will be talking about the sustainable finance market, but in the context of private customers and the mid to small corp companies. And I'm really excited about this conversation because, as you know, I mostly work with large corporates and financial institutions here at the bank, so I don't know so much about this subject. And you two are the experts. So let's just dive into this conversation. But before we do that, Per, could you just explain to us maybe what does Life and Corporate and Private Customers stand for?
Absolutely. So these are two of the divisions within SEB. As you mentioned, Lina, you're coming from another part and serving other clients. So Life, basically what we are doing is to serve different needs from private clients up to actually large corporate clients with pension solutions. So creating safety over a long period of time. So making sure that the employees of large corporates can, slow down with work and finally go into a retirement where they have hopefully both generated returns on their savings during that time, but also from a sustainability perspective. So that's very important. And on top of that, of course, we also have different insurance solutions. If you get sick, if you get ill, if something happens, an accident, etc. So that's basically what the Life organization does. And the corporate and private customers division, as you mentioned, it's basically if I would be a person on the street walking and I see a branch office, this is the division we are serving. So that's a big part of that division, the branch offices. So a lot of daily banking errands, but it can also be if you're a smaller corporate, you need lending for something, this is where you reach out. So private customers, smaller and mid-sized companies. So we're covering more or less the normal banking sort of within our home markets.
So in the context of this podcast, because the previous episodes dealt mostly with large corporates and financial institutions and kind of the sustainable finance, from that perspective, the way we define sustainable finance there is basically finance that, in addition to seeking to generate return, also seeks to generate some kind of a positive environmental and social outcome. Would you say that this definition also applies to sustainable finance from the perspective of Life and CNPC?
From my perspective, I think it's a pretty similar definition, actually. Then we have the opportunity to elaborate maybe with a little bit different products, depending on the size of the company or your sort of personal financial situation, if you're a more wealthy client or if you have a little bit less to save, for instance. So, of course, you come in with a different kind of complexity, the bigger the corporates become or the more wealthy you as a private individual are. But in bottom line, my personal opinion is that the definition applies also for these two parts of the bank.
So I'm really interested to know about the products that you offer to these clients. And let's just imagine a scenario. I'm a private individual who's a customer at SEB, which, by the way, I am and have been even before I joined SEB as an employee. So I come into the branch office and say, I want to invest my money more sustainably.
So I can start and then I can give the word to Isabelle. But if you want to save for something, it might be your pension or maybe you have another goal. Maybe you want to save for your kids when they're growing up, or you just want to save for something you want to buy in the future. Then we are offering a pretty wide range of different fund alternatives for that individual that want to save. And this is, of course, a great way to make your money work for you, but also that you have a fantastic opportunity in different contexts to make a difference depending on what you think is important. And different funds have different opportunities and maybe challenges when it comes to sustainability or sustainable finance. But I think we are going to get into that maybe a little bit later, but the EU context in this is really framing, and helping us to understand if you as a client have a light green preference or a dark green preference. This is going to be clarified going forward and much easier for clients really to understand what they are buying. And I think this is a great sort of development that we see. On top of that, so funds can be a little bit maybe vanilla for some investors. So we also have other types of products depending on what kind of complexity you want. And I think a very good example here is a little bit less complexity, maybe, that you are actually outsourcing a little bit of the mandate to the bank to take action for you, is what we call within the pension area traditional insurers. We make sure that you're not, even if the world is going in a different sort of direction and we have a financial crisis, this product is constructed in such way so you get we make sure that you don't lose all your money you put into this product, which is a perfect pension benefit. And this is not only SEB, this product exists in a lot of other contexts from other providers as well. And I think it's a very interesting product from that perspective, that we as a asset owner and managing this money, we can actually take a little bit more different type of investment options. We can, for instance, invest in microfinance, which is sort of supporting poor people in developing countries getting a better sort of everyday by financing them, and we bake that into sort of the fund or the portfolio that we are managing for our clients. This is something that you could not do yourself if you're not a professional investor. But when we are doing it for you, you can indirectly access it. So we have a lot of those opportunities. We can invest in a sustainable infrastructure that is maybe hard to access if you're a private person saving for something pretty small.
I just want to quickly go back to something you mentioned. Which was light green and dark green. For some of our listeners who may not be aware of that terminology, could you just quickly clarify what that means?
So coming from a world where, you have sustainable funds and maybe less sustainable funds or other funds, some people might ask, why is not everything sustainable to a certain degree? And that was the case also, but it was pretty hard to differentiate different products, different providers of these products, put together the products in a little bit different ways. You meant a little bit different things here and there. So it was very hard to get a sort of aggregated view from all different actors in the market on what is sustainability and not, and also how do you track this, and how do we make sure that we're actually telling the truth. So the European Union, together with all market participants, have been during the last couple of years, and NGOs for that matter as well, developing frameworks for how to clarify these things. So when I say light green or dark green, that's just two categories of funds. We call them also Article 8 and 9, but the more sort of easy word to understand here is a little bit less sustainable, but still sustainable, and more where you have the absolute aim of the fund to really create value from a sustainability perspective. And it might be from an environmental perspective, or it might be from a social perspective or a water perspective, etc. So here we go, and those I lump together as dark green because they have a very clear target, and maybe actually returns in that product are super important, but it might not be the only and the top objective from an asset manager that are managing those funds. And then the light green is a little bit broader category where you can fit in a little bit more different type of funds within that scope. So you say that you have aspects of the fund that are very sustainable, and then you have to have a very clear process in there as well. So it's basically a facilitating aspect of helping people navigate in this world, because there is a lot of different products out there, and it's very, very hard to understand what is a good fund and not. And now comes requirements on us as a producer of these products and distributor of these products to really step up here and help people understand what they're buying.
And Isabelle, I'm curious, how exactly do we measure, I guess, which funds are dark green and which are light green? And say, going back to that scenario where I'm just a private customer who wants to invest my money in a fund, if I ask you what kind of activities is that money going to cover, what are you going to answer to that?
That's a really good question. And I think that This adds on a bit complexity as well, because when we are talking about these more sustainable funds and the less sustainable funds, this is a regulation which is in the making. So what we see is that there are not sort of harmonized markets when it comes to the division of what is dark green and light green. And it's not a harmonization either when it comes to where the money actually goes. What we can see that is another product which is really sort of like having an increased attention, and what I think we will see more about in the future is what some would call a green deposit, and what we have chosen to call a green savings account, which actually earmarks your savings towards green assets within the bank. So when you want to go to a branch office to open a ordinary savings account, you have from now on a green option, because when you go and put your money in an ordinary account, you can use the money wherever you want and they are not locked. But the bank actually use the money to lend out to other customers, both private and corporates. And then you earmark your savings to only go to green projects. And this product you can see from all parts of the world. It's not that it's just common within the Nordic region. And at SEB, we have chosen to use the money to climate efficient buildings. But that could be different if you look at other banks or other parts of the world.
Okay, interesting. So we've talked about funds that a person can invest into, that where the money will be distributed to sustainable projects. We've talked about a savings account. Are there any other opportunities within sustainable financing for private individuals that exist in this market at the moment?
I can just add on once again. There are a lot of options, I would say, and there are a lot of options of tailoring also these, depending a little bit on the complexity you as a private individual can take, and also a little bit connected to how much money you actually want to save. Because my opinion is the more sort of the better your financial situation is, of course, you become, maybe you have more time for this, or you have different opportunities. So within that space, when you're sort of, maybe having a little bit more saved money, then suddenly new doors open up, because we as a investor and asset manager can spend more time on innovating, and we get the mandate from you maybe to put up a team around it, or a single person that can sit a little bit longer to construct a mandate around what you think is important. So there are a lot of opportunities, but they become more and more tailor-made, I would say, the more money and the more time you as an individual have. But otherwise, I think there are a lot of different funds out there with a lot of different scope and aims that can really, you can create a nice portfolio for yourself on this kind of investment that reflects your sustainability values, for sure.
We also have the financing space of a private individual, which I think is very important not to forget. I think almost all customers and private individuals wants to some time in their life wants to buy their own home, and here there are a lot of opportunities within the green financing area when it comes to green mortgages, for instance, where we can see that the market also has developed quite far when it comes to energy efficiency buildings. And that is also kind of interesting now that we see that a lot of banks is trying to nudge private individuals to actually also encourage them to lend money to put on some solar panels on their roofs, for instance, and offer them discounts on the interest rates, just to make it sort of cheaper to lend to those kind of activities, which I think also is very interesting to bear in mind.
I'm curious, you mentioned, for example, that when it comes to investing, that we as a bank invest in green buildings, for example. While SEB is an expert in sustainable finance, we're not necessarily an expert in sustainability or, the environmental kind of aspects of building. So does that mean that we as a bank and other banks perhaps that offer these kind of products, how do we determine what is sustainable and what is not?
I think it has become much more easy now when we see that the market also are developing certain benchmarks. For instance, we have the EU taxonomy, which is supposed to navigate through this space by creating a common sort of terminology for what is green and not. But also we have partnerships and collaboration with other energy experts, for instance. So when a customer wants to borrow money for doing an investment, they can also do it with a bank, but also with other experts. So it will be a partnership around that. And I think we will see more of those kind of solutions in the future as well. Because as you said, Lina, we are not the sustainability experts. We are the experts within sustainable finance, and we definitely need help to navigate within these areas.
I can just add on as well from a investment perspective that we are working when we are integrating these topics in the investment process. We have different tools and means of doing this, and one might be integration. What companies are we picking into the mix of investments and holdings? Another one is engagement that I wanted to spend a little bit time on and just exemplify how we actually work with both ourselves, engage with companies or in general meetings or together actually with competitors of ours as well to really drive change. And within all the other, banks and asset managers out there, there is a lot of competence as well. And I think we can create really good things when we're actually coming together and give a voice to all that capital for our savers' benefits and push in a common direction. And this is something we see a lot of, and I think is a really expanding space, very complicated, but that can actually give huge benefits to the general population if we come together with our peers.
Right, thank you both. And I'm sure we will kind of come back to this question a little bit later when we talk about regulation specifically. But now going back to the corporate clients, what kind of products do we offer and maybe just the market offers to companies who are seeking to make their financing more sustainable?
So I would just start off by saying that when we're talking about a smaller corporate segment, that could be the entrepreneur who just have started their business up until 5 billion SEK in turnover. So the space and the range of different corporates are quite large in that extent. But what we can see, especially when we look at the larger SMEs, as we call them, small and medium enterprises, we can see that there has been a lot of focus on green loans in particular, where we see there has been a lot of focus on green car leasing and green construction loans, where the loans is earmarked to specific investments in energy efficiency buildings. There's a lot of real estate here that could be mentioned. And I think that this sort of corporate segment really they want to have more products, but the products that are in the market today are quite technical. And a lot of these corporates don't have like a sustainability department, or they maybe not even have a person that is responsible for sustainability. And therefore, I think there are a need for product innovation for these type of clients, because they can't. I know that you have been talking in an earlier podcast about sustainability-linked loans and green loans, and these clients are not there yet, and maybe never will be, because these products are so intense in a way that, and here you really open up a floor to innovate and sit down with the clients and see how can we help each other to create the best way going forward.
We definitely love innovation, so I think it's exciting to hear that there is this, potential new market for sustainable financing. When you say that these companies are not ready yet, what do you mean there?
I think a lot of corporates are ready in terms of they want to make a difference and they really want to connect their financing to sustainable solutions. But the markets we need to create for this type of segment, we need to create scalable products, which is transparent, but also less complex in that sense. So I think, and I also believe that the larger corporates, they have their pressure from both investors, but also from the market in general. All the banks all around the world actually need to put a focus on this because there are so many small and medium-sized corporates that needs to be a part of the transition towards a low carbon future.
I can just add as well, on the other side of sort of the spectra is also that a lot of these companies have pension already today for their employees. And I think already here, that's a fairly easy way to start this journey. Or maybe in combination, of course, with the financing space of how you finance the company. But I think already today, when you go in that next meeting with your pension provider, should put a little bit pressure on that you get the underlying options here for your employees actually to make a difference. So that's something that I think is fairly easy that corporates can do already today for their staff. And that's also a very powerful message to communicate to your employees.
All right, so hearing that, I'm really curious about what your expectations are for this market in the future. What kind of developments do you think we'll see in the coming years?
I think one main thing that we will really see, I touched upon it earlier, and that's transparency. We will have a bump now to get over it to, help people understand ourselves how we're going to deal with all of this that comes from a regulatory perspective, and especially how we make these, turn the regulations from something pretty complex into something clients understand. But when this transition is undergoing, which it is already now in the starting phase of, but when we come out of this on the other side, if we ever come out of it, we will have a much better understanding of how I, as a private individual or as a company, can make changes and make decisions that will actually have a very clear objective and really tap into your personal preferences. And that is a development that I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, and I think one can reflect upon the market now and what is happening with the EU regulations coming up and also other regulations throughout the world. There's a lot of growing initiatives and sustainability hubs that really want to make a difference. And I think we will see a lot of new products and initiatives coming to the market and trying to reshape and also, as Per mentioned, increase the transparency and also the comparability between different products, but also between how we do invest or how we do create financing solutions. And this is really the future, and I believe that you need to hold your horses here because it will be so much and prioritize between these kind of initiatives.
I can just quickly add as well, what I think is the beauty of this is the financial markets globally are very interlinked. So if one company, it's enough with one company comes up with a very nice innovation within this space, and you will get ripple effects. And that's how you really transform a market. And that has an impact on every person alive that uses the financial system. So I am very pro innovation regardless of where it comes from.
And speaking of transparency and regulation, we've touched on this a couple times, but could you maybe elaborate a little more on what you're seeing right now in the regulatory space?
So I think Per has touched upon that several times, especially when it comes to the investments and saving space. We will see increased transparency when it comes to how to measure funds, now that you need to be transparent about certain metrics that a fund's how the funds are investing, basically. So you will see not only how the return has been throughout the year, or what the costs are, you will also see how climate has affected the return, and you will also see how the carbon footprint is looking in your portfolio. And also a lot of social aspects are coming into that as well. But we also see, if we're looking at the finance space and on our corporates, we will see that a lot of regulation will come into how transportation, for instance, will be in the future. And there will be a lot of different sort of regulations coming up, which will impact both the financial institutions, but also our clients. And here, I think it's very key that all financial institutions actually manage to be a good advisor within this transformation, because we really want to have all the corporates on board on this transformation journey.
Could continue this conversation, I think, forever, because it's so interesting, but we do have to wrap up. And before we do that, I really like to ask our guests question that's maybe a little bit more on the personal side, kind of stepping out of the conversation we've had so far. Is there anything else that you want to bring up, or maybe a piece of advice that you'd like to give to someone who works in finance or in business and wants to incorporate sustainability into the way they work?
Pretty tricky question, actually. You know, I think a lot of people and a lot of companies are still struggling with, you know, where to put the focal point here and how to do it. But I think, you know, we are always in a need of experts. The area is transforming extremely rapidly. So experts will always be needed. You can find them in your company or outside the company and collaborate with. What I do think is really important is to give opportunities for the employees actually to integrate this work into their daily work tasks. After that comes, you know, if you have time to sit down and focus on it, then you will also come up with ideas on how you can perform better within your business from a sustainability perspective. So I think it's really a lot about you as a manager, for instance, giving the mandate out to do this, allow time for it, and then use experts and colleagues around you to really elaborate these ideas on how you can take your business to the next step.
I can just add that on a personal note, that you as a private individual can do extremely much. I mean, people are changing the world every day, basically. So, and I think a lot of people actually don't maybe think of the possibility to actually change the world through your financing. And I think that is also very important to keep in mind, that your savings actually can make a difference, and also that where you live and where you have your payment cards and how you do your payments also can make a difference.
Those are great answers. Thank you so much. And I really hope that this episode will inspire people to, you know, make those maybe small changes when it comes to the kind of scale of the whole market, but big changes when it comes to everyone's individual way of handling finance. Isabelle, Per, thank you so much for coming today. It was great to have a conversation with you, and hopefully maybe, you know, a few months later we can have another episode where we'll discuss all the innovation that we see in this market. And to our listeners, as always, thank you for tuning in. Please don't forget to subscribe or like the podcast to make sure that you get an update when the next episode comes out. And a reminder that you can always reach out to us at nextgenfin@seb.se with any questions or suggestions for topics for future episodes. But for now, goodbye and talk to you later.